as we remain vigilant about the threat of terrorism. We must move beyond the mindset of perpetual war. And in America, that means redoubling our efforts to close the prison at Guantanamo. It means tightly controlling our use of new technologies like drones. It means balancing the pursuit of security with the protection of privacy. And I'm confident that that balance can be struck. I'm confident of that. And I'm confident that working with Germany, we can keep each other safe while at the same time maintaining those essential values for which we fought for.
All right, folks, welcome back. Steve Malzberg with you on the Steve Malzberg Show. That's Barack Obama speaking in Berlin earlier today, and joining us right now to talk about that and much, much more is our buddy Andy McCarthy, Senior Fellow at the National Review Institute and best-selling author most recently of Spring Fever, The Illusion of Islamic Democracy. Hey, Andy, how are you?
I'm doing great, Steve. How are you?
Good. Thank you, as always, my friend, for joining us. So there he is overseas again in Berlin and, you know, telling the world that the United States has to close Gitmo. So I want you to weigh in on that, but I want you to tie that in. Of course, we expect that from Barack Obama, but your recent piece in National Review about our national security and the national security right going silent, you say that the war on terror is over.
Well, I don't think the war is over in the sense that the enemy.
No. But as far as the silence that's deafening coming from the response to Obama. So talk about what Obama did today, and then talk about what your piece talked about.
Well, I think look, talking about. I think it's disgraceful.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
Yeah, I'm not sure what it sounds like. Keep going.
It's really bad for an American president to attack American policy overseas. Guantanamo Bay, which the president continues to rail against in a really irrational manner. And I say irrational, when I say that, I mean anyone who thinks that it's Guantanamo Bay rather than Islamic supremacist ideology that fuels terrorism just hasn't been paying any attention for the last 20 years. But, to go over to Germany and attack our policies is really something that I think is just ought to turn a lot of Americans off. It certainly it offends me. I hope I wouldn't like it if a Republican president did it or a conservative president did it, although I can't imagine that happening. But to have him use that forum to attack American policy, when in point of fact, if he really felt that strongly about Gitmo, he could close it tomorrow. He'd have to repatriate all of the terrorists who are in it.
Right.
And the reason he's having such a problem with it is the world turns out to be much more complicated than candidate Barack Obama said it was. It turns out that there are a lot of bad people in the world who want to mass murder Americans who can't be tried in civilian court under due process standards because a lot of what we know about them comes from intelligence that can't be used in court. So, he continues to wrestle with these, paradoxes of his own making. When I say that the national security right has gone silent, Steve, what I'm saying is that these NSA intelligence gathering controversies that we're now having are actually quite old. They go back to when the Patriot Act was enacted and when FISA was overhauled. That's the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act during the latter half of the Bush administration, and the reason that what we thought at the time, and I continue to think, were important national security defense policies, the reason that they were enacted in the first place was against all of the complaining that you're hearing now from both progressives and libertarians. The national security right stood up and made a vigorous defense of the power of the presidency to defend the nation in wartime, the power of the commander-in-chief to prosecute war rather than have it regulated by the courts. And I think that was vital to getting these these pieces of legislation passed in the first place. Now, I think the national security right has kind of fallen away. It's not the dominant force that it was, and I say that with chagrin because I'm a part of it. But I think that, in some ways, we allowed national security to get inextricably intertwined with this, what I think was really a foolish policy of trying to promote Islamic democracy overseas, which really didn't have anything to do with our security, whatever you think of it. And you have a lot of libertarians on the right who were never particularly comfortable with these wartime policies, and whose discomfort with them has increased over time. So they've kind of fallen away. So you have this situation where we have the same debate that we've really been having for the last 10 or 12 years, but in order to prevail for the national security right, there's got to be a vigorous defense of the president's ability to run our national security, which is, I think, constitutionally the way our system is set up. And the right doesn't seem inclined to do that for Obama. And I can't say as I blame them, but I continue to think these policies are very important, and we'd be foolish to let them go by the wayside.
We're talking to Andy McCarthy here on the Steve Malzberg Show. There's a documentary coming out, and it involves the TWA Flight 800. 17 years ago, of course, that flight went down off the coast of Long Island here in New York. And at the time, it was a Boeing 747. It had just taken off from JFK, 230 people aboard, July 17th, 1996. And it was en route to Paris. It exploded and it crashed. And, they did an investigation. And at the time, we were told it was a faulty fuel tank that exploded. And now you have several of, I guess you could call them whistleblowers, who participated in the investigation for the National Transportation and Safety Board, now saying that they're coming forward. They're all in this documentary, and they're saying, wait a minute, we were told to shut up. We were told to say what we said. We were threatened. If you want to keep your job, we feared intimidation. We feared retaliation. And they say that a missile or something of that nature hit this plane and brought it down. Now, I remember, Andy, at the time, and you live in the area, I remember at the time covering this story when I was at WABC, and there were so many eyewitnesses, just people that the media was talking to, saying, we saw something go up. We saw something go up to the plane, and then the plane blew up. So what do you make of this?
Well, Steve, this is something that's gone on. This is a debate that's gone on for a very long time, and all of these claims were made during the time of the investigation. And I know that there were people inside the investigation who were very torn by not being able to come up with a definitive answer for what happened. A theory that seemed to discount all other possibilities. I want to withhold judgment and see I want to see the documentary. I also want to see what the background information is. And I say that because Jim Kallstrom, who ran the FBI for a lot of the time that I was in New York, and who ran the investigation of this particular atrocity, has been very, very strong on the notion that the conclusion drawn by the official investigation is correct, and that these theories about a missile are off base. I know Jim for a long time. He's a very honorable guy, former Marine, if there is any such thing as a former Marine, and a real straight arrow. And the thing that backs me up here is I don't see a good reason for our government to have covered up the truth if the truth was something other than what the official investigation uncovered. I'm torn about this like everybody else is. I'm very curious to see the documentary, but I am backed up by the fact that Jim Kallstrom, who I think very highly of, is pretty adamant on the fact that this was not a missile attack, that it was a malfunction.
Andy, my friend, we'll reconvene maybe after that documentary.